So today I'll be talking about the power of having a speak up culture, having environments where employees' voice is welcome, and it's really good for business.
Wow.
What? Okay, red light means we're on. And we're live. We're live. We're live. We're here. We're here. We're live. Live from our basements. Hello, LinkedIn universe. So good to have so many of you here. Hello, everyone. Steven Shadletsky here. Delighted to be with you again. That's our cue, Rich.
Nice. That was good. That was good.
Yeah. Thank you to Alejandra from my team for making that snazzy toe tapping, finger snapping video. Hi, everyone. I'm Steven Shadletsky. I'm so delighted to be here with my very dear friend, Rich Diviney. Rich is at home. I'm at home. We're here with you and delighted to do so. I have a little secret, which is we've been meaning to do this for a really long time. And so I texted my great pal, Rich, and I'm like, all right, this is the excuse. Like the book is
Actually,
launching.
you didn't tell the whole story. I said, I'll only do this if you write a book. So
So dare accepted.
Yeah.
And we're here and we did it. I know we're live on LinkedIn, we're on StreamYard, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. Ali, let me know if I've missed any of the places. Amazing seeing all of you here. Steven Shapiro's here. Woohoo, get this party started. Love it. Hey, Kelly, Will. I'm not sure, Will, if you're in Toronto or traveling abroad. Kaz is here. Our friend Monique is here. Rich, hey, Mo. Kim, wonderful Kim, thank you for being here and for your kind post on LinkedIn. Kim, Danny, Leonie, all the way from Australia. Amazing. Wow. So this is what we thought we would do. Oh, back in T-Dot. Awesome, Will. So please keep the chat hopping. We can see it. Let us know what comments and questions that you do have as things happen. Joe Lara in the house. Alexandra Zaharis is here. Amazing. This is so cool. We do have officially our first LinkedIn user. So whoever wrote so exciting, congrats. Please let us know who you are. We'll be keeping an eye on that chat. So I wrote this book. You may have heard of it. It's called Speak Up Culture. It just came out yesterday. Rich has got a copy as well. Ooh, there's a bookmark. Proof of reading. Very good.
Proof of reading, yes.
And Rich also came out with his book a couple years ago, The Attributes, 25 Hidden Drivers of Optimal Performance. And though, Rich, you didn't write a book on leadership or teaming per se, you wrote a book around optimal performance, of which our performance as individuals, as teams, as leaders, there's sort of undertones. For those who have hopped in and dipped into my book, you know that I reference Rich's work quite a bit around skills versus attributes, around leadership attributes, team ability attributes. And so we figured we would hop on and we would have this conversation to merge our work. We have a number of you who have written in questions that we're going to reference so much. So thank you for that. And we'll take some live questions as they pop in as well. Rich Diviney, for those who don't know, is a retired Navy SEAL commander, spent 23 years, more than 10 deployments to Afghanistan, and Iraq. More than most, he knows what it means to lead, and he knows the ramifications of not having a speak up culture and not being an effective leader or an effective team member when the stakes are literally life and death and fate of foreign affairs. So this guy knows a thing or two around the importance of leadership, teamwork, and cultures when it matters a lot directly. And I figured I would invite Rich on to ask me a few questions that he has as he's been dipping into the book, and share in some questions about both of our work as well. And we'll take your live questions as well. All right, Rich, I'm going to stop talking for like at least 30 seconds now.
Yeah, I want you to keep talking because this is about you. I just want to say how proud of you I am, and the book is phenomenal. So congratulations on that. And just for the audience, I mean, Shed and I probably met almost 10, well, maybe a little less than 10 years ago.
More than 5, less than 10.
Something like that. It's hard, it's hard to quantify sometimes. But I tell you, when I first met Shed, and we actually started working together quite rapidly, we were kind of doing stuff together. this is something I immediately noticed about him. This ability to speak up, to be able, and not, it was like, well, he spoke up every time. He was always talking, but no, that's not what I mean. He was always very transparent about the things that he felt, the things he was seeing, and honestly, it was quite a familiar feeling for me. Coming from the SEAL teams, as you may imagine, in the Navy SEALs, you can't have anything but a speak up culture. The environment is too dire. The stakes are too high. You have to inculcate this culture of anybody having the ability to kind of say what's going on and speak up if something's wrong or something's not happening or something's happening that shouldn't be. And so meeting Shed and kind of started getting to know him, it was a very familiar. I mean, he and I bonded fairly quickly. And I think because the brotherhood, that element was right there. And so as we began to work together in many facets, and talk about a myriad of different things to include leadership, he started really kind of ruminating on this idea that, hey, this speak up culture idea is something that I think I can really expound upon. And man, he did in spades. And so what I'd love to hear, Shed, because I think the audience would love to hear from you, is just tell us the evolution of the idea and kind of this whole give us some background.
Yeah. Well, one, I just want everyone to know that Rich Diviney said that I have at least one attribute that will qualify me as a Navy SEAL. So I'm very happy. Thanks, Rich. I have many more attributes that wouldn't, but there's one. You're saying there's one. Sorry, Rich. The question was like, what was the impetus? Why did I write this book?
Yeah, talk to us about the evolution, the evolution of the idea and the whole thing.
So I mean, as many folks who are here know, you and I first met each other because of our work on Simon Sinek's team. And when I work with Simon, who's a well-known, prolific author and speaker, and I would go out and share his message, I would often get the question, when are you going to write a book of your own? And my answer to that was always the same. It was if and when I ever come across something worth writing about. That I never wanted to write a book for the sake of writing a book. I never wanted to be a, quote, keynote speaker who had something to sell at the back of the room. That to me is a definition of a shitty book, and I had no interest in that. But when 2021 hit, a confluence of events, including the COVID-19 pandemic, I was willing and ready to just say yes to some other stuff. And there's a funny story that involves you. I don't know if you know this. So I made a conscious effort at the beginning of 2021 to start saying yes to more things that came my way, to just explore. And one such opportunity came from a mutual friend of ours who's a veteran as well, Barry Engelhart out of St. Louis. And Barry reached out. This would have been it probably would have been in about March of 2021, March, April, saying, hey, I have a virtual keynote coming up. I'm part of the board for the St. Louis chapter of SHRM, Society of Human Resources Management. And he's like, hey, do you want to give a talk, give a keynote at the October event? And I'm like, yeah, sounds great. We hopped on a call. I sort of said, hey, we can either, here are some of the scenarios of what we could do. And we agreed that we would, share my own ideas, of which I had none at that point, which was code for, I'll call my buddy Rich and see if we can do it at the same time and do a shared keynote. And I called you and you're like, I'm not free. I went, well, this is a problem. And so I didn't think much of it for the next months. And then June or July hit and I got the email from the conference organizers saying, hey, Shed, please provide your talk title and talk description. We're looking forward to your event in October. And I went, oh, snap. And there was this positive pressure cooker moment where I had to come up with my own ideas. At first, I started calling it listen down, which is, I think, great leaders work to listen down in their organizations. We all hear the term listen up, but I'm like, hey, let's listen down. I didn't love how that sounded, though. It felt a little top down and authoritative. I had a quick conversation with someone by the name of Sue Barlow, who helped Jim Collins on Good to Great. And she said, call it speak up, call it speak up culture, which is what it is. And it's more positive. And so that was sort of the birthplace of it. I started jotting down all my notes and then worked with my great editor and publisher. But that was the inception. It was by accident. I mean, it was It was me saying yes and backing myself into a corner, leaning over to my wife shortly after I filled out that talk title and description and said, I think I'm going to write a book, to which she said, I'd advise against it. It's a lot of work. And now we're here. And the two other things, Rich, which you've heard me say, is I grew up with a stutter, so I know what it feels like to be voiceless. And then I've been parts of teams that maybe you have as well, where there is a thriving speak up culture and where there isn't. And relationships and performance are just better when there is. And so I want for you, for me, for everyone listening in, for as many people as possible to be part of these speak up cultures.
Yeah, yeah. What were some of the things you learned? I know, having written a book, the idea and the inception is only it's only act one, and actually the art and act of writing actually stimulates thought and takes the idea sometimes in different directions. What were some of the things what were some of the assumptions you started with that changed over the course of the writing period, and maybe some of the things that stayed the same?
Yeah, love that. So I handed the draft of the first 3 chapters to a friend and a scholar that I really admire and respect. Her name is Tiziana Casciaro. She's a professor out of University of Toronto. She wrote a book called Power for All. And I shared the first 3 chapters with her. And she said to me, you need to decide if you're writing different things or writing things differently. And I went, ooh, that's really good. And at that moment, which was only a few months into the writing process, I made the decision that I'm going to write things differently. I thought I was writing a book, and a full sort of admission here, I thought I was just rebranding psychological safety. We've heard that term psychological safety. Amy C. Edmondson, who endorsed the book, and Amy is wonderful. She put that term on the map. Doesn't belong to her. The term team psychological safety does. But the funny story with that is she wrote a paper to be published, and the reviewer said, Amy, what you're talking about is psychological safety, to which she said, whatever's going to get me published, sure. But it's an unsexy term. It's a little confusing. It can be confused with safe spaces, which is not what it is. And it kind of puts an academic coat on a really human emotion and experience. And so I wanted to rebrand psychological safety to speak up culture. Good old Zig Ziglar, people don't buy drills, they buy holes. If the drill is psychological safety, the hole in what you get and what we want is a speak up culture. But as I delved into the work, both from my own experience, the interviews I was doing, and the research that was already out there on the topic, we came to realize, and I say we because it was very much a team effort, and Ale, who's on my team, really helped me see this, is that a speak up culture isn't only about psychological safety. The 2 questions that we ask ourselves before we speak up are, is it safe and is it worth it? It might be psychologically safe, but it may not be worth it, either due to bureaucracy, red tape, systemic issues, a change in habit that's simply too hard. And if we keep speaking up and feel safe to do so, but no change occurs, apathy can set in. And so the 2x2 matrix and the framework that we've formed into the thesis by accident of this book is that leaders make it both safe and worth it for the people around them to speak up and share ideas and feedback, concerns, disagreement, and mistakes. So it was really that was the big sort of, we are, I think, both writing things differently because of my style and stories and humor, as well as writing some different things as well, which has been a joy.
What were some of the things that stayed relatively the same? I know that it's sometimes you look back and like, actually, this thread or what this idea is pretty solid and has remained so. Anything of note?
I mean, the basis of psychological safety, absolutely. I was so happy with how the first chapter came out, or rather the preface, which is about the Boeing 737 MAX. We got some amazing testimony from someone who is an anonymous inside source, formerly in Boeing, and then sort of last minute said, I don't feel comfortable with this. I feel like I can be identified. And we had to take it out, and it was okay. It ended up being, good, and made it more of a preface rather than a chapter 1. I mean, and it's the book is written in a way there are some books out there, Rich, that like you can pick up a book and turn to different places and read it, not in order.
Mhm.
There's an arc to this book, and I wanted that to be the case, around starting with the dire scenario of, if you don't have a speak up culture in what used to be your day job as
Yeah.
a Navy SEAL, or making airplanes, or working at a nuclear power plant, like there are things where life and death is the result, and I wanted to start with that. But then I wanted to prove the point that the responsibility lies in the behaviors of leaders, whether formal leaders or leaders by behavior. And then
Yeah.
you have a quote, which is my favorite quote on leadership right now. I'm really looking for another one so I can stop saying that you have my favorite quote on leadership. But leaders aren't born, leaders aren't made, leaders are chosen based upon the way that you behave. That's
Right.
a Rich Diviney quote. So I point out leadership, I point out culture. And then, yeah, I really end the book on a really personal note, that leadership is personal.
Yeah.
It has to be personal. You have to care,
Yeah.
and you have to be invested in it.
Well, it's interesting because you and I have talked about this before, and the idea is, the only thing you lead are people. You don't lead machines. You don't lead processes. You don't lead spreadsheets. You may manage processes, manage machines, manage spreadsheets, or maintain them. But leading is all about human beings, and so that's
Mm,
often forgotten. People think that they say I lead this organization, forgetting that what they mean is the people in that organization. Um, so yeah, it's a really interesting and poignant poignant point, if you will. So I want to actually remind everybody. I don't know if anybody, whoever's in the States, whoever's in the U.S. dialing at 220. Everybody in the U.S. is going to get an alert on their phone. So it's one of those safety tests. So if your phone goes off, that's why it's happening. It's not because the aliens are attacking. I mean, they might be attacking, but they
it'd be a
won't.
complete coincidence.
That'll be a coincidence. That's happening.
We think.
Yeah.
And also, please hop in any questions in the chat for both Rich and I. Please keep them coming as well.
Let's you want to hit some of these questions that came in so we can talk about them? I think a couple of them are really good. So let's see. I love this one. This one from Melise. What was your biggest challenge or saboteur before you found your courage to speak up?
It's a brilliant question, and I want to hear your response to this as well, Rich.
Yeah.
So one, I mean, I built my voice because I had to. In college, university, I very much by accident found myself in leadership roles. At my first year at college, I rushed fraternities. There it is. Hey, it came early, Rich.
Yeah,
It's 2:18. Yeah, maybe that's the aliens, and then the other one's at 2:20. Thanks for that. I'm glad you told me. So I'm like, Rich, get down, duck and cover. So at university and college, I went to the University of Western Ontario. I think it's now called Western University. I went and rushed for some fraternities because that's what you did. And I hated what I experienced. It was hierarchical. It was insecure young men harassing even more insecure younger men because that's what was done unto them. And I went, no, thanks. I'm not going to do that. And very much by accident, again, me and a few buddies started our own fraternity. I was the president of a fraternity in my first year at university. It was hilarious. But because of that, and we started this amazing chapter of Sigma Alpha Mu. It was a great time, and we did some good work in the community. And because of the initiatives that we did, I found myself in public speaking opportunities by necessity. And I hated it. I really didn't enjoy it. I had a saboteur in my head, Melise, of I'm not good at this. People are judging me. I don't like how I sound. But there is this hilarious moment, Rich, where I was in my first year chemistry class, which was like a huge auditorium with 450 kids. We were putting on a charity event. I wrote to all of my professors asking if I could do a quick promo for 30 seconds or a minute of this event. And two of my teachers said yes. One of them was this professor, Kay Calvin, who was like 6'10", this huge, powerful woman who I'm convinced could dunk a basketball. She was amazing. And she said, yeah, sure. Go and do a thing. I went up and I spoke for 45 seconds, didn't breathe. My face felt as red as a tomato. My leg was shaking. I was so nervous. I walked back up to my seat thinking that I had just failed. And one of my fraternity brothers was sitting next to me. And next to him happened to be two attractive women. And I was about to say to him, wow, I just failed. And he said, great job. The girls really like the sound of their voice. They think it was sexy. It's like, what? But like, it was just an amazing example of what's going on here may not be what's going on here. And then the real kicker for me was I started to share and speak about the fact that I overcame a stutter. And I took a public speaking class in college, and I gave a 5-minute talk on overcoming my fear of public speaking. And I was decent at it, but it was the first time that I spoke, and it was about service. It was the first time I spoke, and it was about giving something that I had to try to help others. And I was hooked at that point. Yes, Dennis Shackle, who's a professor at Ivy at Western. It was his class. And so that was a huge moment for me. And then I just kept speaking up, Rich, because I felt like it was the right thing to do. And then I had some experiences in my career where I was actually punished for speaking up, and it didn't go well. And that was really hard. And that was really the impetus for me to be like, I think I actually might want to make this the focus of my work. Yeah. Because I want there to be healthy speak up cultures.
Yeah. Excellent. Cool. Good. Yeah. All right. We got a couple questions in chat. Let's hit some of those too. So Nia, what was the biggest surprise or the thing that you learned about speak up culture that you didn't know before?
Yeah. Hey, did you have an answer, Rich, yourself to the previous question on a challenge or saboteur before finding the courage to speak up yourself?
A quick one, and that is it was actually relatively easy for me, because when you're dropped into an environment, which I was as soon as I joined the Navy and went to SEAL training, where the environment itself will kill you if you turn your back on it. I always say, like the ocean, I don't care what kind of swimmer you are, or what kind of surfer you are, if you turn your back on the ocean, it will kill you, right? And when you have environments around you that keep you extraordinarily humble and have to keep you vigilant, you learn that there's a necessity to say what's going on in real time, in real truth, real honesty. There's no mincing words. And so honestly, I mean, I was in an environment where you'd get kicked out if you didn't have that type of mentality, almost brutal honesty, which sometimes is not as as fun, but yeah. So I think it was inculcated me from the beginning,
This, by the way, is what I think is so interesting, because in the situation you were in, it was so direct that if you didn't have a speak up culture, like there was real harm to yourself and other people and their health and well-being, not to mention the enemy getting to where you don't want them to go. In most of our day jobs, it isn't as direct. But the point that I make, we know from the National Institute of Health, from Gallup, and from UKG, that our relationship with our boss has more of an impact on our health than that of our relationship with our doctor or our therapist. And it's at par with our relationship with our life partner. And so though it's a slower burn, the position of leadership has stakes. It's not as direct, but
well, it makes the problem even more dangerous and insidious, actually, because if it's not in your face so viscerally, it just tends to just build up, and it's the boiling frog syndrome, right? So you just don't notice the change.
Which apparently doesn't happen. I think the frog just jumps out, by the way.
I don't know. I've never tried it, of course. I'm not.
Well, I know doing this afternoon. Okay, we'll go back to Nia's question. So the biggest surprise, I think, Nia, this for me was, I thought I was simply rebranding psychological safety. And as it turned out, I was actually describing a phenomena in which we ask ourselves, is it safe and is it worth it? That it's those two axes that, and I have this in the book, it's the 2x2 framework of safety derailing into fear and impact derailing into apathy. We want both safety and high impact, not an unhappy marriage of fear and apathy. And I've been there. So yeah, that was it for me. That the thesis of this book is that leaders make it both psychologically safe and worth it. And speaking up, it's never about, you've taught me this, Rich, that I harp against this term fearlessness. Like, there shouldn't be a celebrated thing as a fearless leader.
Right.
And you've taught me that there actually are fearless leaders, and they're dangerous. Those are the ones that, quote from you, are going to get you killed or get you hurt. Fear is vital. Fear is biological. It's data saying, alert, watch out. It's a risk modulator. And so leaders aren't the ones who eradicate fear. Leaders are the ones who create less fear and make us walking into risk more bearable.
Yeah. Or I would say, in addition, encourage and allow for stepping into fear, because that's necessary as well.
So long as it's a good risk to take,
so as
right?
long as it's a good risk to take. Yeah. They help risk assess, which is what fear does.
Yeah.
All right, let's just hop back to one of the questions that came in prior to, what if the environment in an organization is not supportive of speaking up? What then?
Yeah. So, I mean, that is where your lowercase L leadership really shows up. And again, Rich, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. But if you're an environment that doesn't support it, I mean, I liken culture to a pickle jar. So you yourself can be an amazing cucumber that's world class, that's highly ethical, talented, hardworking. Yes, there's such a thing as a hardworking and ethical, talented cucumber. Put that cucumber in awful pickle brine or in a less than ideal environment, and that cucumber will become an awful pickle. And it's no fault to the cucumber. You can't blame the cucumber. You have to examine the brine that it's in. Now, it isn't easy, but you can shift a culture through your behavior, even if you're not the most senior person. We can have influence without title, and so the tail can wag the dog. We can find and nurture and feed those relationships that do feel like they're healthy speak up culture relationships. In absence of that, focus on what you can control, focus on those relationships and feed those relationships. If that means you hop to a different team, department, or organization altogether, so be it. But you can also influence a culture for good on the inside out. I've found that most poor leaders are highly insecure. And it's not that they want to be bad leaders, they just don't know how to be better. And so, and you've taught me, Rich, as well, that arrogance is just a really loud form of insecurity. And so we can have some empathy for those leaders. We can try to develop a relationship, try to influence up and Jedi mind trick them to be better. But you can't force someone to grow and transform. That's an inside out job. So focus on your growth and transformation, and find others who are up for that work as well, and see where that leads you and them.
Yeah, that's a great. I think I think you hit it on the nail on the head right there. So, all right, let's hop back to the chat here. Will asks, looking back on the way to publishing yourself to publish, what's a challenge?
Pushing ourselves to publish.
Pushing yourself to publish. What's a challenge or form of resistance that you overestimated, and what's one that you perhaps underestimated?
You want to go first, Rich?
Okay, sure. So form of resistance that I overestimate, or excuse me, that I underestimated was the ability to write. I mean, it does, I remember, staring at that blank screen with the cursor blinking and being like, what the heck am I going to write on adaptability today? Right. So you realize that is no small feat. I mean, you just have to, I found my trick was just to start writing something. Even if I just thought of a story, I just start writing just typing out a story, and then I just kind of get into a rhythm and hopefully begin to put stuff down. So getting it down in words seems like it's always longer and harder than you thought. I think the one that I overestimated, or I guess I maybe not overestimated, but didn't realize, was the creativity that comes with the act. And I thought that was really empowering, because once you do get into that groove, man, I mean, I know I sometimes had ideas flowing so fast that I'd have to keep a separate notebook next to my keyboard so I could just jot down notes, because I didn't want to stop I didn't want to stop kind of the flow I was on by going down this other tangent, but I just kept on getting these ideas. So it's a momentum filled event that I found, which was something I did not expect.
Yeah. It's a brilliant question, Will. Thanks for those answers, Rich. For me, I mean, I knew a lot about myself and my working habits, for better or for worse, coming into it. So I knew I wasn't going to be the type of author that every morning from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. I will write 1,500 words. Like, that's just not my jam. I knew that's what wasn't going to happen. What I underestimated was the number of times you would read and review and edit, at least for me. The sort of running joke I had with my wife is I'd lean over to her and say, I finished writing the book again. Just because, like, I probably, just the number of times that you read it and the number of times you read the same things and the different ways that you read it based on where you are in the editing process. I also think I underestimated how much I was going to cut. There's so many, we cut an entire chapter that we looked at it and we're just like, this isn't doing anything. We cut stories that were good in isolation, but didn't add much or flow where it was. The thing that I overestimated is I heard horror stories of authors being so precious of what was put on the cutting room floor, of like, no, I can't take that out. I was actually really okay with cutting a chapter, with taking stories out, with paring it down. I overestimated how hard that was going to be. For me, it was actually quite easy to cut stuff.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go. Let's just hop back here. Let's see here. Chris had a great one. Let's see what Chris says. Do you believe organizations that focus on attributes rather than skills when hiring and promoting people have an easier time creating and maintaining a speak up culture? I'll let you go first on that one. So,
okay. So do I believe that organizations that focus on attributes, so this is the thesis of Rich, your book, that, skills, I'm going to steal your thunder. Let me know how I do. Skills we aren't born with, we learn. They're easier to test, measure, and assess. Attributes are far more innate, harder to see, but there are true colors. Riding a bike, skill. Falling off bike, scraping knee, now our attributes are showing. Do we persevere, hop back on the bike, or wait 3 weeks before we can be in the same room as a bike? Again, by the way, these aren't wrong. It just is. So the question is if you focus in your hiring and promoting on attributes, do you have an easier time creating and maintaining a speak up culture? I mean, my instinct and thesis is far easier, because if you're looking to hire for attributes, you're looking at things like humility and adaptability and empathy and resilience. You're striving to build a team where 1 + 1 = 4, not 1 + 1 = 0.5. I think if you hire for skills only, you can have, again, what Rich describes as the dream team paradox, where you have the best of all these domains, but ego reigns supreme and the team doesn't gel together and doesn't form more than the sum of its parts. So my short answer is absolutely yes. And there's quite a bit of time and words spent in the book drawing upon Rich's work and how hiring and promoting using attributes for leadership roles and just for any roles makes for a stronger team. So short answer, yes. Rich, please add.
I would say also short answer, yes. There may be some caveats, and the only reason why I say that is because culture is, attributes are the foundational element of any culture. But what the culture is, in fact, is it might be different, right? So I always kind of say culture is the whatever the predictable and predominant patterns of behavior are in a team or organization. That's the culture. That's what a culture is: the predictable and predominant patterns of behavior in an organization. So all these behaviors, whatever they are, can be distilled down to attributes that cause those behaviors. If you have a culture of behaviors that necessitate and promote a speak up culture, and what those then you'll know what those attributes are, and you can hire for those attributes. You can hire for people who fit the culture. But there are some cultures that don't have that, and it's largely because they may not know it, and so they may say, oh yeah, we're going to hire for attributes, but they don't know the right attributes to hire for, or their attributes aren't fitting a speak up culture. It's a, hey, I say you do culture. And so I think for the most part, though, if we're talking about high performing teams, Shed and I will both agree and pound the gavel on this one, is that high performing teams have speak up cultures. High performing teams require it, because that's how you move extraordinarily fast, when you have all entities available to give input, give insight, and give perspective. And so if you want a high performing culture, you want to figure out those attributes, and then hire for those. So
I just want to double click on this, because I love, Rich, that you just take things from such interesting perspectives. So yeah, if you hire for the attributes of closed-mindedness and submissiveness, you're not going to have a speak up culture,
Right.
but you say, but we hired for attributes. Yeah, you hired for closed-mindedness and submissiveness,
Right.
for deference to authority. You're not going to have a speak up culture. And then the other thing that I love, and Chris points to the culture equation here in the comments. The other thing I love is, just because you have the attribute doesn't mean that it gives you a hall pass that you're going to behave it all the time. That the true test of our cultures is the behaviors that we reward, the behaviors that we tolerate, and what behaviors happen. So just because you have the attribute doesn't mean that you're just going to behave it all the time.
Mhm.
You have to work on it. You have to reward it. It has to be tended to like a good garden.
Yeah. All right. Let's head over to Tina. In your opinion, is speak up culture a part of psychological safety, or is psychological safety a part of speak up culture, or are they just intertwined? I know you hit a little bit. You touched on this a little bit in your intro, but if you can dive deeper.
Yeah, and Tina, I know the book just arrived for you either this morning or yesterday, so you will get to this point in the book very soon. So my point of view is that psychological safety is a key component of having a speak up culture, and that it's both: is it psychologically safe, and is it worth it? So is there psychological safety, and is there a perception of impact that my speaking up will actually yield some sort of positive benefit or outcome to the team or the thing around me? So I would view psychological safety as one of the drills to the whole of a speak up culture, the other drill being a perception of impact.
Great. Good. All right. Let's hit Chris's while we're at it. If culture equals values times behavior, which values and behaviors are key to speak up culture?
Ooh, that's really interesting. I'd love to jam on this with you, Rich, and others. Please comment into the chat what you think.
By the way,
So
Chris, just so you know, Chris also wrote a pre-question: which specific attributes can flourish the most in a speak up culture, which I think is related. So we're going to hit two of Chris's questions in one.
yeah, do you have instincts right off the top, Rich, before I take up waste 3 minutes?
Which specific attributes flourish the most? Well, courage, open-mindedness, actually often open-mindedness and curiosity. I think
authenticity.
Yep. Decisiveness. So those are some of the key ones, I think. Situational awareness as one of the mental acuity ones, because you have to be vigilant about what you're actually noticing and seeing. So I think those would be the ones that bubble up to the top.
Do you view emotional intelligence as an attribute or a bunch of attributes?
Yeah, emotional intelligence is an attribute. The bunch that it sits on, as you know, we have 9 categories now, but the category that it sits under is social intelligence. Social intelligence is a collection of attributes that when combined result in social result in or give the result of social intelligence. One of those attributes is emotional intelligence. Yeah.
So there's 2 things, Chris, just to add to this, and I hope that's helpful. The other 2 things, so this didn't make it into the book simply because I learned about it and came to it after we had printed the book. So maybe this will be part. Danny made a really funny comment of the next book, Speak Up 2, Speak Harder, which will not be my next book. But the 2 things that I came across that are adding to the work. This is one of the fun things, Rich. You write a book and they're like, there are 5 main categories of optimal performance, and now there's 9, just because you write a book doesn't mean that that's all that needs to be said on the topic ever again. Right. So 2 things that I came across, Chris, that I think will help with your question. One is a Venn diagram that was mistakenly created by comedian Craig Ferguson as it relates to speaking up. And the 3 questions are: does it need to be said? Does it need to be said now? And does it need to be said by me? Which requires situational awareness and emotional intelligence to figure out, does this need to be said right now in this meeting or in this conversation and by me. It's a really interesting framework. And the answers that you get from those 3 questions can help you determine how best to proceed, including, team, I have something. I think it should be said by me. I don't know if now's the right time. Let me start and tell me if I should stop, The other thing that I'm coming to is there's a sweet spot of speaking up. On the other ends of the spectrum, there's speaking up here, there's sucking up, which is, oh, it's rewarded to speak our mind here. I'm just going to hog all the airtime. No, that's not speaking up. That's hogging airtime, and that's kissing up. On the other side, there's being a jerk and being nasty. And what a speak up culture is not license to throw tact, respect, decency, emotional intelligence, and situational awareness out the door. Now, for us as leaders, if someone does speak up, but they do it inappropriately or not at the right time, we can still reward the intent, but coach on the behavior and coach on the impact of that behavior. So just a couple of things to help thicken the plot of how I'm thinking about this stuff, because it's not clear cut. It's gray.
Yeah. And to thicken the plot even more deeply, which I think is I thought of as you were talking, is when you don't have a speak up culture, certain attributes are required. So courage becomes one of the most important ones. And Ed Pearson is a great example of this in your book, right? Who had just the courage to do it anyway, even at risk to himself. So,
which is how I figured out it's not just psychological safety, because Ed is a perfect example who spoke up at Boeing. It wasn't safe, but he felt so connected to the stakes that at own personal risk, he displayed the courage to speak up. So bang on, Rich. I just want to reward Joe's vulnerability. I'm so nerding out right now. Thank you. Love it, Joe. Love that you're here with us.
Let's see here. A couple more about speak up culture here. I think this is from Frank. I think we as humans intrinsically understand the value of what your book is promoting. So why is it so hard for so many managers to not embrace the concept of true speak up culture?
Ooh, great question. I mean, it's hard. It takes vulnerability and confidence and humility. I say, Frank, that an insecure leader is a very dangerous leader. What leadership is, I think, there's no coincidence that every single leadership development program I've ever heard of, seen, experienced, Rich, I want to know if this is your experience as well. They all start with a module on self. Self-awareness, leading self. Like, of course, like you need to figure out what instrument you're working with, build relationship and amplify your strengths, as well as build relationship around your limitations or weaknesses, and then be vulnerable. This is your concept, Rich, of dynamic subordination, that like the value of vulnerability, it's not sharing all things to all people all the time. That's called oversharing. Vulnerability, and you and I do this really well, Rich, because we work together a lot in front of a room. We know each other's strengths. So when it comes to, getting the room comfortable and bubbling up, like that's me.
When it comes to talking and socializing, that's you. When it comes
to and then when it comes to being like, all right, Shed, shut up, let me tell the room what they actually need to hear, that's you, right? And so we play a really nice dance because we know each other's strengths and we know each other's limitations. So that work is really hard work, Frank. It takes a lifetime to figure out and contribute toward, which is part of the beauty of being human, is we can learn about our strengths and our limitations until our dying day. So the reason that it isn't pervasive is because it's hard work. And the reason why it's worthwhile is because it's hard work and it pays off.
Yeah, I love your question, Frank. And the only thing I'll add to that is that, I agree, humans are we all intrinsically understand the value of this, but really the human condition, what we have to remember, one of our biggest fears is to not be a part of a group, right? We need to connect, we need to bond. And so this is why Shed's cucumber in the pickle jar analogy is so good, because we will do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. And if the group dynamic does not allow for something, we will tend to fall into that group, even though we know it's not that fun, not that good, and we'd rather be doing something else. We'd rather be part of a group. So So sometimes we just have to, we have to either fight against that, or if we're in charge and we want to be leaders, we have to make that environment what we need it to be, right? We need that group to have the rules, the conditions, the behaviors that actually encourage what does intrinsically feel good. So
And Amy Edmondson wonderfully points this out in her work, that the benefit to speaking up is disproportionately in favor of the group and the team. It is not in the favor of the individual. It's hard work. It takes risk. It takes vulnerability. And so I think, Rich, if you set up the pickle brine and the culture that it's safe and worth it, it makes it more likely for it to happen.
Cool. Let's go to Tina. Another one. How do I foster a speak up culture with and for people who are not outgoing or bring in baggage from a previous toxic job?
Love it. And we're just going to throw that up here for others, Tina. Thank you so much. It's a great question. So a couple things that I've had a fun time dispelling about leadership recently, Rich, and I haven't shared this with you, so I'm curious to hear your ideas. Warmth and charisma are not requisites of leadership. You do not need to be warm. You do not need to be extroverted. You don't need to be outgoing or have riz, as the kids call it, charisma, to be an effective leader. What you do need to do is care a great deal about people. But I've had leaders in my life, Rich, I know you have as well, who are grumpy as heck, but they're consistently so, and you know what to expect from them, but you never have a doubt at any moment that when push comes to shove, they have your back and they care about you. They don't view you as a cog. They view you as a human being with a beating heart, and a brain. And so, Tina, environment matters more than personality. This is how you can also transform culture. Is like in some cultures, as example, in the Korean culture, you don't speak up to authority. There's even nuances built into the Korean language of you just don't do that. Now that's fine for your father-in-law, not so good if you're a captain of a plane. And so in Korean Airlines cockpits, they do not speak Korean. They've been trained to speak American English because it is a lot more easy for a lower ranking pilot to say to a higher ranking pilot, this isn't safe. We need to make an intervention. So for those who aren't outgoing, you can design with them and say, can I call upon you? One of my favorite colleagues that I've worked with for many years is highly introverted. And though he'd be silent for most meetings, whenever he spoke, it was always brilliant because he wasn't silent because he was bored. He was silent because he was thinking. And my favorite thing to do with permission is if by like minute 43 in a meeting, he hadn't spoken up, I'd go, David, what do you got? Like you're thinking something, just throw it in. And he'd always go, I don't know if this is relevant, and it was always relevant and it was always good. And it always deepened or moved the conversation to a better place. When it comes to folks who have an emotional backpack on, and we bring our conditioned and prior experiences to our current roles, it's just consistency. It's like, how do you feed a deer? You just put your hand out, you don't make eye contact, and you just wait for them to come to you. You need to consistently exhibit and exude those behaviors to encourage and reward folks to speak up. If you're doing everything right and they can't come and can't do it, you can't force a horse to drink water. You can lead a horse to water. You can't force them to drink. All you can do is encourage and reward, and hopefully, get them to take some modest, reasonable tests. And if it goes well, they'll keep taking modest, reasonable tests until they're now conditioned to be like, hey, it's safe and worth it to speak up here.
Yeah. All right. So we have about 3 more questions I see in the chat. I want to hit them before we run out of time. So let's move on. Danny says, when Kim Scott's Radical Candor was released, it was weaponized by some as a license to be jerks. Is that a potential risk with Speak Up? And how do we mitigate?
Yes. Next question. Kidding. So Danny, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Kim Scott's work and of Radical Candor, but when let's face it, most people read book covers, not books. So the beauty of Kim's model is it's care personally and challenge directly. It's both of those. The issue is if you put something like Radical Candor on a book cover, people might view it as licensed to just act like a jerk. With Speak Up, I think what I warn folks against, and I've even had someone attempt to weaponize this on me, which is like, you're the speak up guy, speak up. And I'm like, speak up isn't an order. Speak up is a culture that it needs to feel both safe and worth it. Are there relationships professionally and personally in my life right now where I'm not speaking up? Yeah, because it doesn't feel safe and it doesn't feel worth it. Like, that's okay. But I have the capacity and ability to lead and do the best I can and to transform and to focus what's in my control. I think what the weapon could be is, well, Shed said to speak up. It's like, well, you still need emotional intelligence and situational awareness. And, we still need to, as leaders and as individuals, create environments where it is safe and worth it to do so. So speak up is not an order. Speak up is a culture that we can all create in the relationships that we have, one relationship, one team at a time.
Very good. Very nice. All right. Monique, so nice to see you in here. When a new CEO / executives that believes in the speak up culture takes over for an executive who does not believe in it, and has molded the culture to such, what is the first step for a new leader to change the culture that has been embedded?
Do you want to go first, Rich? Because I want to read the question again.
Yeah, well, what I would say is, the number one thing, and we talk about this in high performing teams. Number one thing is to build trust. You have to build trust, and trust, it's a belief. It's not a feeling, and a belief is a human emotion that's been rationalized or justified, which means you can't make anybody trust you. You can only behave in a way that allows people to choose to trust you. And so the way you do that as a leader is you begin to behave in ways that allow for people to choose to trust you, and you begin to create a trusting environment as the leader. And it's one of these classic, Shed and I both rail against this idea of leaders going first in everything. Because we assume this word leadership is, I'm in front doing, I hate this. I would never ask my men to do, I heard this in the military, I never asked my men to do something I wouldn't be willing to do. That's complete BS, because my men can do things way better than I can in many cases, right? So of course I would do that. The great leaders we know often are in the back. They're influencing, they're pushing, they're promoting, they're empowering, right? And so all that said, when the leader does have to always go first is with behavior, right? We have to go first with behavior. We have to model the behavior we want to see more of, and then reward the behavior we want to see more of. And so it has to do with starting to behave, I think.
So, Monique, the thing I'll add here, and thanks, Rich, for going first to buy me some time to come up with an answer here. So, I like, Monique, in your question that it says a new CEO or executive that believes in the speak up culture that's taken over for an executive who did not believe in it. The challenge is if you have a new executive who comes in and there's still another executive at the same level or a higher level who doesn't believe or who doesn't behave that way, that's tension and something's got to give. But if you're literally taking over, I cite a story in the book on this. Alan Mullally. When Alan Mullally went and joined Ford Motor Company in 2004, he took over at Ford for a previously quite tyrannic leader, in which if you spoke up, you just weren't at the next meeting. It was like sitting at a boardroom table with Dr. Evil. If you brought bad news, a red button was pushed and you just weren't at the next meeting. So folks were conditioned not to speak up. Ford was failing. Mullally came in, asked for project status meetings from his executive, and it was all green for weeks. And Mullally is like, hey, either you're lying to me, you're lying to yourselves, or your people are lying to you. We need to embrace more truth telling in this organization if we're actually going to turn this thing around and avoid bankruptcy. Now, who needs help on something? And one guy, Mark Fields, raised his hand and said, I got something that I could use help on. Mullally stood up, gave him a standing ovation, encourage, and reward, said, great, who can help Mark? Someone else raised their hand, and a new precedent was set. And Mark was promoted informally and was sat next to Mullally at the next meeting, as if to say more of that. So, Monique, if you want to set a new culture, focus on the behaviors you wish to see, encourage those, and then reward them when they show up.
Nice. All right. I think we have time for one more, and looks like Will has that one more. You've both spoken about the dangers of insecure leaders and egos. How can peers or subordinates help leaders that may hog the mic appreciate the need for them for them to sit down so that others might speak up? That's a great one.
Yes. So, Will, I mean, I fully acknowledge, look at Rich and I. Rich and I are two middle-aged white men, right? And what's important is that if we only hear from people who look like Rich and I, not only is that morally and ethically wrong, it's silly for the team. And so if you have a situation where someone is hogging the mic, especially if they aren't someone who's of a marginalized population, where speaking up for them is even harder, it's up to the leader to actually coach some of that behavior. So let's just scenario it. Let's say Rich, though he doesn't do this and he wouldn't do this, but let's say Rich is hogging the mic and he's speaking up disproportionately and he's literally suppressing other people's voices. I would say I would give Rich some feedback. I would give him an FBI, a feeling behavior impact, and say, hey, Rich, it's so wonderful that you feel confident speaking up and that your contributions over the many months I've been on this team, whatever, are valuable. And I really need you to work on a new thing. And the new thing is choosing your spots and raising the voice of others. If you truly wish to be a leader, it's not only about your voice, it's also about amplifying, hearing, raising the voices of others. So let's work on, next meeting, speak up only 2 times, pick your spot, and if someone else has something to say, you can say, hey, Shed, you might have something good on this, right? So it's actually coaching them out of hogging. I would call that more sucking up rather than speaking up. And the opportunity is to hear from more voices and more diverse voices, which makes the team stronger.
Yeah. And I would add, especially when it comes to leaders and egos, sometimes it's difficult. Leading up is difficult, but I would say approaching with empathy. And what do I mean by that? Insecurity, ego is always a form of insecurity. Or I should say elevated ego. Ego gets a bad rap, but because it's just sense of self. But elevated ego or arrogance is always a form of insecurity, right? So I always learn. I kind of learned to, since it's a form of insecurity, say, okay, why might this person be feeling insecure? Where is this coming from? Can I try to get a sense of what's causing this? What are the root causes? And if we can be, even as subordinates or peers, if we can be and find some empathy and figure out why this is occurring, then perhaps you can attack it from different angles and say, well, it's because this certain thing is not going the way it should, or this person is concerned about their ability to do this, right? So again, I think empathy can help win the day on this. Doesn't always, but it's just it's certainly an idea that was not in my front view mirror there when I was leading, but certainly became so as I kind of matured and grew.
Rich, I misunderstood the question, so I want to take one more kick at the can on it. Because Will, you asked about how peers or subordinates can help leaders, so lead up when the leader themselves may be hogging the mic. That's hard. It's a lot easier for a leader to say to a subordinate, stop hogging the mic.
Mm-hmm.
Harder for us to speak up and say, hey, leader, you know that you actually have more genius on this team that you're not tapping into. That's harder. Things that you can do: have empathy, attempt to develop some relationship with the leader such that you can make an intervention around, isn't it hard having to be the one that comes up with all the ideas? What would be possible if you heard more from the team? Or do a 360. Because Rich, what are the 3 things you need to develop an attribute like empathy? You need self-awareness, self-awareness, motivation, and then the willingness to deliberately put yourself into scenarios in which that muscle can grow.
Yeah.
So, again, transformation is an inside out job. It shouldn't be our job as subordinates to help a leader transform, but we might be able to help them just a little bit and give them a 360 and see if they actually listen.
All right, let's do one more, last one, because we're almost out of time. I want to make sure people can go on their way. But Jose, how can organizations create an environment where candid conversations and speaking up are not only encouraged but protected, ensuring that the pursuit of truth never results in retaliation?
Very good, Jose. So a couple things. So one, there is a place for anonymous hotlines and anonymous avenues. If given the choice between having no feedback or no speaking up versus having anonymous. I'd rather anonymous than nothing. And sometimes when you have an ethical or a harassment concern or something that's going off the rails and you don't know where to go to, having an objective third party, HR, a hotline, something can be very helpful and effective. This, Jose, is the reason I put the word truly in the subtitle of the book, because as Rich has taught me, again, there's so many merges here. Listening is a skill. Like, we can learn to become better listeners. But I use truly listen because listening can be weaponized. I can listen, but then use what I get to manipulate or use it against someone. In the vein of having protected and safe conversations, we need to put the word truly in front of listening, which is a combination of the skill of listening with the attributes of empathy and compassion. So I think we need to work on our leadership. And if again, if we hear something that we know is above our pay grade, and that we know we need help with a therapist or a coach or HR or legal or something, I think we need to call in help, and make it a team effort so as to protect the people who are taking that risk to speak up.
All right. Very good. Very good. Well, listen, I know we're at an hour, which we said we'd never go over, but we're a minute over now. So nice work. But anyway, I'm going to give you the last word, Shed. But before I do, I'll just thank you for being such a great friend all these years, and for allowing me to be a part of your journey. I know we have a lot more work to do together, which we will. So, but last word for you, or
Thank you, brother.
please.
Thank you, brother. Big love. Well, Navy SEALs are always plus or minus 30 seconds. So we've broken that promise because we're now plus or minus 60 seconds. But just thank you all. There's so many people here that have helped me spread this word, yourself included, Rich. You endorsed the book. You've been such a great friend. And I wanted to feel delighted and grateful with this book being out in the world. It's day 2 of the book officially being out in the world. And I feel that way. I feel grateful. I feel delighted because of you, and because of all the folks who joined us today. So thank you so much. And let's keep making it safe and worth it for the people around us to speak up. Thanks all.